There's two kinds of people in this world. There's those that learn from the mistakes of others, and then there's the others. Unfortunately, today, I've got to be the others. But I'm here to admit I was completely wrong. We're going to rip most of the electrical stuff out of this boat and completely redo it. I do not want to do this. This is going to suck worse than anything that has ever sucked before, including your mom. Several years ago, I filmed an entire wiring video on this 1648 John boat build. The overall video was fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It showed you how to wire things correctly, showed you how to put a switch panel together correctly, but my placement of things in this boat was absolutely stupid. I have no clue what in the world I was thinking when I put some of the stuff in this boat that I did, but I'm here to admit I was completely wrong. We're going to rip most of the electrical stuff out of this boat and completely redo it. Number one biggest mistake I made in this entire boat build was putting my switch panel up here. The reason this is horrible is because if I'm fishing at night and I want to turn on my light so I can see on the inside of the boat, I've got to walk all the way up here on the front deck, go around this pedestal seat, move it out of my way, open up this hatch, which doesn't open all the way when the pedestal seat is in place. I have to lean down inside this hatch all the way up to the front of the boat just to be able to flip a switch. I know my original thinking was at the time when I built this boat, I wasn't doing a lot of night fishing. I wasn't planning on doing any night fishing out of this boat. And I was like, well, most of the stuff is all lighting, so I'll just put all the switches in here because I don't really fish at night that much and it'll just be out of the way. Fast forward a couple years, life got busy and the only time I could fish was at night because I was so busy during the day. And this is just an absolute nightmare. Now my battery on off switch and my trolling motor circuit breaker, all that is fine up underneath here. I'm going to move it to a place that's more convenient for me. Those kind of things can stay up underneath your hatch or underneath your deck where they're out of the way. That's no big deal. But your main switches that you use, put them where you are going to be using them while you are fishing. Here's a really good example of what I'm talking about. I've got really good light bars on the front of my boat. They light up everything. I love having them on there. The only problem is you're not supposed to run them when other people are on the water, and I just think it's rude. So I try to turn them off anytime I see anybody out on the water. And I would expect them to do the same for me, even though most people don't because they're assholes. If I'm back here in the back of the boat, I'm driving my longtail, I'm driving my outboard, I'm driving whatever I got on the back of the boat, and I see somebody, I have to stop what I'm doing, run all the way up here, go around this because this is always in the way, lift this hatch up just so I can flip the lights off. Same thing with my navigation lights. I've got them all around the front of the boat, and when I stop to fish, I need to turn these off because I'm usually anchored up somewhere. And when you're anchored, you're not supposed to have these on. These are only while you're driving. So before I can actually do any fishing, I got to run up here and flip the switch off for these. Learn from my mistakes, people. This is all crap that I should have thought about when I was wiring up this boat. So the next bonehead move I made on my boat was all my interior lighting up underneath the deck and inside of my catwalks that lights up this whole area at night is all white lighting. Well, guess what color bugs love? White light. So anytime I want to be able to see anything at night in this boat, if I turn on my interior lights, everything is white and I get swarmed with bugs. So now I've got to get rid of all my white lighting and go with red lighting because red lights don't attract bugs as much. And because I wasn't genius enough to think about this when I was building the boat, now I've got to go in and rewire everything because I don't have enough switches to put red lights on here. And my next dumb move on the wiring of this boat was I was not thinking that I might be wanting to fish at night. And because of that, I never wanted to put any lights on the outside of the boat so that I could actually see the water. Then I started fishing at night and I realized very quickly that I don't have any way to see anything around me in the boat when I'm actually fishing. And I always thought that these little light strips were kind of stupid. I was like, that's just for party boats and people that want to look cute out on the water. But now I realize if I would have run some red lights all the way around my boat like this, I could probably see when I'm catching a fish or what I'm casting to a little bit better than what I've had to do, which is carry a flashlight. And of course, flashlight has white light and I shine it all over the place when I'm casting out, when I'm catching a fish, and then I get swarmed by bugs, which is just absolutely stupid. Why did I do that? And because I wasn't planning on this or planning on any kind of future expansion for the electrical on my boat, I don't have enough wiring or switches for this, so now I've got to add it. Yay! Well, it's time to embrace the suck. I actually did all of the lighting and electrical work on this boat over 6 months ago. So let's take a look at how it's held up for the last 6 months, and I'll show you a little bit more of the details that you didn't see. So we got the lights. Our cheapo Amazon lights are actually holding up pretty good. I'll leave a link to them down in the description box below. They are not yellowing yet. It's been 6 months, but they so far look okay, and they're still pretty decently bright. Our Nightlight single row LED light bars up here on the front, I've got a full video on waterproofing these and a video on this bumper. I get a lot of questions about that. I'll leave a link to those down in the description and up here if you want to check that out. But these are all holding up really well. They're extremely dirty right now because I've been doing a lot of fishing. But as you can see, no water, no condensation. You can actually still see some of the silicone in there from where I squeezed a little bit too much. And a whole front light bar still holding up really, really well. Glad I did that mod of taking out that gasket and putting the silicone in there. These little pod lights have held up really well. I do like them. I don't use these as much because I very rarely fish up here on the front deck unless I'm bow fishing. And most of the time when I'm bow fishing, I'm using the extra light that is up underneath here. Now, I didn't show this in the video when I was actually doing the install, but when I cut the end of this light strip that goes all the way down to the side of the boat, I had about 4 foot left over, and I took that little 4 foot strip, and it might be kind of hard to see, but I put it right up underneath here, and it shows up really good when I'm bow fishing at night. Here's a little sneak peek of a video that's actually coming up very soon here on the channel. I'm gonna be testing out a bunch of different cheap Amazon bow fishing lights. This is what that red light up front looks like and gives me just enough light where I can see across the front deck. So this is what I consider my main switch panel. It's up here on the back wall of my front deck. I got my main battery on-off switch, and that turns everything on inside the boat. And directly above that, I've got a USB charging voltmeter. So I have to turn this one on so it's not drawing power all the time. It tells me what my voltage is, and then it has a USB-C port and a regular USB down here in the bottom. It's come in very handy for charging my cell phone, especially when I'm doing YouTube videos and fishing. So my first 3 lights are what I consider my safety lights. I like to keep those all together. I've got my running lights, which is going to be the front navigation lights, my anchor light for the back white light, and then my bilge pump, all is my first 3. So we got those running lights. I have LED strip nav lights up here, and then I also have 2 more back behind my light bar that you can kind of see. There's one up here in the top, and there's one down in the bottom. Same thing on the other side. I've got one up here in the top, one down there in the bottom, and then I've got this one that runs down the side. And then we've got the anchor light, which that is for this port back here, and my anchor light plugs in right there. And then I run 2 bilge pumps on this boat, and I've got them both wired to this switch right here. So these next 2 are both the lights inside the cockpit, which I consider in my boat this area to be the cockpit. This is where I do all my driving, fishing. This is where I spend most of my time inside this boat. And I've got my original white lights. That's what this switch is right here. You can kind of see where those lights shine down up underneath those catwalks. I left the white lights in just in case I ever want to use them, but most of the time I go with the reds, and that is what this switch is right here. And that one controls this pod light, this pod light over here, and then that red LED strip that's up underneath the front deck. And then back here I have a secondary switch panel, and I have another set of cockpit lights. So that is for my red lights that you can see kind of shining down in there and all down the side of the catwalks. And then this next switch is, I couldn't find a good sticker for it, so I just put spreader lights, and that is going to be that red light strip that runs all the way down the side, both sides of the boat. And in this switch I put it back here so it's very close to my mud motors. When I'm running at night, I got my headlight switch within arm's reach when I'm running my mud motor. And that is those Nightlight light bars that we looked at earlier in the video. And again, got a video all about these. And then I also included another USB voltmeter back here. I got 2 different USB ports, USB-C and regular USB, and then I got an on-off button for the voltmeter. I use this one mainly for when I'm fishing. If I'm recording a video, I can charge my phone or my GoPro or my 360 camera while I'm fishing. And then last but certainly not least, we've got our fuse block panel, and that is safely tucked away right here underneath my front hatch. Got a little drain hose out of the way for my dry hatch on my lids, and that runs back up underneath the ribs into the back of the boat. I got my circuit breaker, which also acts as an on-off switch for my trolling motor there, and then my complete fuse block with all my fuses, and I have 3 extra spares. So if I ever decide later on down the road that I want to add something, I want to add another little switch panel or more lights, I've got 3 extra spares on this one already ready to go. And then lithium batteries, this is another video that's coming up soon. You're not going to want to miss that one. That's going to be a good dramatic video. But overall, I'm super happy with the way this entire electrical redo turned out. There's really nothing I would change about what I did. The only thing I would do different is I might add one or two little things. And neither one of them are super important, but I'll tell you about them very quickly. One is I wish I would have put some reverse lights on the back of my boat somewhere. Not because I back up a lot at night, but those few times that I do, I hate having to hold a flashlight and look back behind me to see what is back there. So some kind of little pod lights in my float pods or up on the transom or something like that would have been very, very helpful for fishing at night. And the second thing I would add, if I could, it's not super necessary, but I wish I would have put some red light strips across the back of the transom just underneath where the motor clamp is at, just to help give a little bit of red light on the back of the boat. The red lights on the side are great because if I got a fish and I'm trying to reel them up and they're right next to the boat and I'm trying to grab them with my fish grips or something like that, I can see perfectly fine. But if they come up on the back side of the boat, on the very, very back where the float pods and the motor is at, sometimes it can be just a little bit difficult to see because that red light is only down the sides. Again, neither one of those are deal killers. I am totally happy with the way this turned out, and I'm glad that I took the time to rip everything out of this boat with the wiring and just completely redo it. I love the way that it works now. I spend a lot of time fishing at night, and this has made my fishing life so much easier. And it looks good, so it gets extra cool points, but definitely not as many cool points as Scooter gets. Send It video would not be complete without some time in the haters corner. I've got my haterade, so here we go. America. If you're not familiar with the haters corner, what we like to do at the end of every video is stand in the corner and see who was the most butthurt in the comments. And in the haters corner, we don't use anyone's real names. We only call them Scooter because we know people on the internet are so very sensitive. Let's see what Scooter had to say. On my recent trailer video where I did a whole bunch of mods to my boat trailer, Scooter wrote, "Heck of a great video so far, Chris. I'm about at 5-minute mark and I just asked my mom about penetration. She was confused. I'm confused. So I'm going to ask the salesman at Harbor Freight tomorrow what is good penetration, and he can demonstrate good versus bad penetration. I will keep you updated." Now back to the vid. I don't even know where to start with this one, but I do know one thing. Scooter, the only penetration that you got to worry about is that penetration you get when you buy that one-ply toilet paper from the Dollar General and you get a little whoop. That's your penetration right there. Whew. Our next Scooter commented on my catfishing video where I took you guys catfishing and show you what I do. Scooter wrote, "Catfishing is as entertaining as watching Biden tell a story." Well, I mean, it wasn't a great mystery of the universe, Scooter. It was a picture of me holding a giant catfish that said how to catch catfish or something like that. What in the world did you expect? Like, why even click on the video and then comment that catfishing is boring? And not only boring, but as boring as watching Joe Biden tell a story. Since we're on the topic of Joe Biden, I want to honor him as one of the great presidents of the United States by reciting one of his most famous quotes. "Cats are like microwaves. The greatest gift is the ability to forget." He said that. Our next Scooter was not just any old Scooter. This is the king of the scooters. This is Kevin, just the male version of Karen, if you don't know. Scooter Kevin wrote, "Oh, wow, I'm famous now. You seem to enjoy the shaft phrase a little too much. Have you learned to read a tape yet? Hooked on Phonics has a course." You know, Scooter Kevin gives me a lot of crap about my tape measures because every time I buy a tape measure, I can't buy it unless it has the fractions written on it because I'm not good at fractions or reading a tape measure. So it makes me look a lot better in videos and in person when I'm reading a tape measure that has the fractions on it instead of saying, "Hey, can you cut that to 6 and 3 lines past the first bigger line?" So if you're like me and that's how you read a tape measure, go to Harbor Freight and get you one with the fractions already on it. Cheat code. But in that video, I was talking about trolling motor shafts, and apparently Kevin, that's the only thing he can focus on. I'm like trying to show you how to install an auto boat on your boat, and the only thing he can think about is I said the word shaft. Sounds like something Scooter Kevin would be into. Our next Scooter didn't just leave me a comment. He wrote me a poem. I don't know why commenters on YouTube think that it's okay to send people poems, and not only did he send me a poem, it was flagged as potentially inappropriate, so this must be a good poem. Let's see what Scooter wrote. "Scooter, Scooter, anus, pooter, ate a bag of dicks. Try as they may to tell you nay." I'd like to direct your attention to line 1 of the poem. "Scooter, Scooter, anus, pooter." You know, it's okay to fart because if you don't fart, it will travel up your spine and end up in your brain, which is where really shitty poems come from. So if you gotta let one rip, let it rip so you don't wind up making poems on YouTube like Scooter. Now, I personally am not much of a poem guy. I'm more of a story guy. And this comment or poem in a YouTube comment reminds me of a story. It goes something like this. Once upon a time, there was Scooter. Go fuck yourself. The end. I love that story.